history to ever be convicted of a crime. Here's Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Cuomo. We are fresh off the day of remembering the sacrifices made for this country. And now we return to the chaos that is consuming it. Closing arguments in the Trump hush money trial came and went today. Now we wait. First, we're waiting for the former president, also known as the defendant in this action, Donald Trump. He's supposed to be speaking about this cessation of the case. When he comes, we'll take a listen. All right. But for now, the obvious question is whether the jury finds Trump guilty of violating campaign finance law by doing what? By paying off women? No. By messing around outside of his marriage? No. What was the crime? Concealing the payments to benefit the campaign. Did they make that case? What must the jury believe to convict? Was that element proven? Which jurors may make a difference? We have an interesting analysis on that for you. Does it matter that there are 34 counts? Now, usually I would say, yeah, because that shows you the full palette, the full complement of what they could find the defendant guilty on. But maybe not this time. Why? We'll explain. Trump's defense in closing was simple. You cannot convict on Michael Cohen's word. Attorney Todd Blanche spent nearly 3 hours attacking the credibility of the prosecution's star witness. He called Cohen the MVP of liars. He called him the GLOAT, which was an acronym for the greatest liar of all time. That's a good line. I don't know that it'll work, but it's a good line. Now, the prosecutor, Joshua Steinglass, also knew that this would be coming. Oh, also, I don't know why people online are seriously suggesting that the prosecution got to go last in this case because it's rigged. The prosecution always goes last. Okay? Social media is not reality. You cannot just believe what you hear there. It's a lot of people driving agendas and a lot of BS. Anyway, the close by the prosecution was a reminder that this case is about a, quote, mountain of evidence, not just the word of a single man, that man being the contumacious Cohen. We also got more proof that this case is not just about the facts and the law. And you could see it everywhere, especially outside the courtroom. You had the Biden campaign today sending actor Robert De Niro to make their case. The 80-year-old wound up getting into it with several Trumpers. Take a listen.
Donald Trump wants to destroy not only the city, but the country, and eventually he could destroy the world. And Trump-inspired insurrectionists stormed the Capitol. Brave men and women from law enforcement put their lives on the line to defend this country. They stood there and fought for us, for you. For you.
They weren't fighting for me.
No, they fought for you, buddy. You're able to stand right here now.
Is that what you're supposed to do outside a criminal trial? They say that's because that's where the press was. And De Niro did not mention the case. But doesn't it just make the case that this is political any way you look at it? And it does make you wonder, can any good come from this? We are waiting to see if we will have a very disturbing first, a criminal conviction for a former president of the United States. Is that where we're heading? Let's ask the better minds. Jury consultant Richard Gabriel, former New York City prosecutor Paul Callan, defense attorney Mark Geragos. If I have each, oh, beautiful. Who thinks this will be a conviction?
60-40, I say conviction.
All right.
60% chance.
Brother Gabriel?
I'm not voting on conviction or acquittal. I know everybody likes to hear what's the outcome here, because it really can go. What's more important, Chris, is really sort of how does the jury go through the evidence? What's going to be important? 8 hours of closing argument is not going to be determinative of jury outcome. It's really going to be the mixture of how these jurors get along and how they go through the evidence to decide ultimately on these verdict questions.
Hey, Gabriel, you running for office? Or are you giving legal analysis on this show? Don't you try to sidestep my question, handsome. Gregor goes, I'm going hung. What are you thinking?
If there's a bell curve, I'm going to 80% is conviction on at least one count, 15 to 20% is hung jury, and I suppose there's an infinitesimal little portion where they could acquit him, and it's a very slight chance, on some of the counts where his signature is not on the check or on the invoice. Remember, in the 34 counts, there are groupings.
Yeah, so all right, let's break that down. Then I want to get into it with Richard and Paul about who we think will matter on this jury, which I think is very interesting for the audience to understand. And it's very unusual for us to look at it and see what we see in this case. But those counts, Mark Garagos, I suggested in the introduction, ordinarily I'd say, ooh, more counts, more better for the prosecution, more bites at the apple. But here, it's a little bit different. Those aren't really all separate counts, are they?
Now, the way they've divided this thing up, I mean, there is an argument, and it's been made. California, we've got a doctrine that would not basically allow you to do this, arguably, or to sentence on all of them, arguably, as well. But there still is a distinction that can be drawn amongst the counts. Some have Trump's signature, the checks, meaning the checks. Some don't. Mind you, jurors like to compromise, just like anybody else, if you've got a split. And compromise is not a friend of Donald Trump or normally the defendant, because compromise usually means, find guilty on a lesser or find guilty here or there. I still think that the guilt is the most likely, hung jury second most, and it's very, 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 if I'm handicapping it, not guilty across the board, I think is almost impossible.
I'm going to want to get to Richard on this, but Paul, I just want you to come in on it. I'm thinking they're sitting in this jury, and you're going to have people saying, but they're not 34 different counts. It's all one transaction. They're just showing different aspects of the same transaction, Paul.
They're going to be given a jury interrogatory sheet that's going to have 34 counts on it.
Right.
Okay.
That's
so
true.
That tends to separate it very much in terms of discussion. And that's why I think it would be very hard for them to go through all 34 counts. And by the way, of those 34 counts, 11 of them involve checks that were actually signed by him in that Sharpie with the big signature. And they've heard testimony that this is a guy who watches the cost of light bulbs, he says, is important.
I was surprised by that, by the way. Because as a student of Trump, I've never heard, his personal money, not wanting to pay, all of that kind of stuff. Yes. But that he micromanaged a business, never.
Well, but this money comes out of his trust fund.
Right.
You have to remember that as well.
Right,
so
fair.
To think that he would not have been aware of how it was logged in. And of course, Michael Cohen, they say Michael Cohen's a liar, but he's Trump's liar. He's been working for Trump for 7 years.
Right.
Dealing with his dirty laundry.
Yeah.
He didn't think he was a legitimate lawyer. He thought he was a guy to go out and extort people, scare people. And this time, the worm has turned on Trump. Anyway, getting back to what Mark was saying about the 34 counts, and I will agree with Mark on this. I don't think there's going to be a conviction on 34 counts, but this thing is built for compromise. And if they come in with one count,
then he's stuck.
One count,
then
it's
he's
the
stuck.
Same thing. It's
I know.
a 4-year
That's why I don't like that they were allowed to do this, because it's all one transaction. And I didn't see how those could be separate criminal acts. I get it by the letter of the law, but it didn't seem to be fair, but we are where we are. So, Brother Gabriel, I let you out of the penalty box for not answering the first question. And the point here is we've got something unusual. We've got a good read on 3 different jurors. 2 of them are big shot Wall Street, what we used to call white shoe attorneys, okay? And the third one, who I believe is juror number 2, is somebody who's got a nice personal profile in terms of, having read Trump's book. All right, not that unusual. Art of the Deal was huge. He's on Truth Social. That's rare air. Following Cohen on Twitter, I don't know what that means. But you got 3 people there that could make an impact. What's your read?
Well, I think you've identified at least 3 of them. Truth is, there are 2 attorneys. They're going to have a big impact. because the jurors are going to look naturally to them to interpret the law and stuff. Some attorneys are pretty good about saying, hey, I'm not going to be interpreting the law for you. But there also, you have the investment banker. You have another pretty high-profile financial guy. Those are guys who are also going to be able to talk about financial transactions, the involvement, CFOs versus, general counsel, all of that kind of dynamic of what goes on inside a corporation. You've got 2 engineers on this also who are really looking at scrutinizing the evidence with a microscope and stuff. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of people that are going to be doing it. I think that going to the points that Mark has said also, which is this can take some real time because they can go through the counts. They can do what's called an evidence-driven type of deliberations, or they could just literally, a quicker deliberation is always just what we call verdict-driven. How many hands yes, how many hands no, and then let's go and figure out what our differences are. And that's where the personality really get
go ahead, Mark.
into it.
I was just going to say, and by the way, to Richard's point, I have actually, in high-profile cases, had jurors where I talked to them afterwards. And one I'm thinking of in particular, I won't call them out, but I said, what took you so long? And the response was, we didn't want to be an OJ jury and come back not guilty too soon, so we waited until Friday after lunch. Jurors think about this stuff. This jury is not sequestered. My prediction, you won't hear that they've got a verdict or they're hung until Friday at 3 o'clock.
Wow, really? That's interesting. I would not have suspected that. It's also bad for me because I'm not supposed to be on the show on Friday. So
too bad. Too bad. There's an old rule of thumb on this: 1 day of deliberations per week of evidence, and I think we've heard 3 weeks of evidence. I think.
But here's the thing, though. Here's a scenario that I don't believe is just naked speculation because I actually lived it once, and I sat on a jury. And it was a very obvious case, except they had done a number of buy and busts that day, and they had gotten sloppy with the paperwork, and some of them had gotten confused. The buy and bust is what it sounds like to you guys at home. They were just making drug buys and busting small leaders trying to work their way up different criminal organizations. There was one guy who was super educated, super not anti-police, but really worried that they cover for each other too much. And he would not move. It didn't matter how obvious the analysis was. And I wonder if that doesn't happen here, where you get 1 or 2 who say, look, this is a bad guy. I don't like him. He obviously paid these ladies off. I don't think he cared that it was about the campaign. I don't think he knew that that's what Cohen was doing. I think this was more about Cohen, and I'm not moving. This is about politics. And then you get hung. That's why I think it's going to be hung.
I can't see them going that way because if you step back and look at this case from 30,000 feet, okay? 1, did Trump have sex with Stormy Daniels, and did he have reason to want to pay her off? Doesn't matter, except it would be so embarrassing in the political campaign.
He'd done it before.
Election.
He'd done this before plenty of times.
Yeah, but it never came out in the aftermath of the Access Hollywood case. You remember, it was a disaster at the time.
Damage was done after that. He'd already apologized. It's the only thing he's ever apologized for. His character is already mud.
He had apologized, and then now the next thing you find out that he's sleeping with a star of porn movies. It would have been disastrous for his campaign at that time. He had every reason to pay her off. And you say it's about Cohen being a liar and a crook. Why would he be paying her $130,000?
I don't think the question is whether or not the payment was made or that Cohen made it for Trump. It's how Cohen made it for Trump. Hiding it from the campaign disclosure was his way of getting it both ways, of getting a tax deduction, getting paid back. And he thought it was clever. And Trump didn't know anything about it. And we know that because on the recording, which I got as a reporter at CNN, he says, we'll pay cash. And Cohen says, no, I'll take care of it.
Well, why does Trump want to pay cash? Because cash is even less detectable than the method suggested by Michael
Maybe
Cohen.
He always paid cash, but we don't know that it was to hide it from the campaign. Go ahead, Garagos. Garagos is going to help you, by the way, Paul.
Okay,
that's how much I'm slapping you around.
All right, go ahead, Mark. We agree.
The problem with Paul's analysis, and I love Paul like an older brother. You notice how I got that dig?
That was good. That was good.
The problem with the analysis.
Too, you know. Yeah. Go ahead.
The problem with the analysis is it's not like you're going to convince any of these people of anything during the 3 weeks of evidence, 4 weeks of evidence, whatever it is. They came in. That's who they are. They're not sequestered.
Right.
They're basically either going to drink up the atmosphere and that's what's going to influence them, or they're going to be somebody who, basically gets their news from Truth Social, or is a big firm lawyer who's used to defending, people who normally are somewhat undesirable, if you will, and are going to just stick to their guns, banking on the idea that's anonymity. I just don't see anything
true. I agree with you on all of
beyond
that.
a guilty
Let me ask you one other thing. And this will also be probably what matters most, okay? If the jury convicts, okay, 1 count, 5 counts, again, I don't know that, at least to the judge in the sentencing phase, it will matter too much how many counts there are. But what do we believe happens in terms of sentencing? Meaning, it doesn't happen that he appeals and then we get to the election and this all goes away, especially if he wins. Or 2, do you think he is sentenced, and what do you think the judge does in terms of incarceration? I'll start with you. Paul, go ahead.
Under New York law, they'll do something called an investigation and sentence report after the conviction. And that report usually takes about a month or so to do in a normal case. Maybe it'll be a little bit longer in this case. But after that month and a half or 2 months, the report comes back to the judge and it's set down for sentencing.
Right.
The judge then will follow the recommendation of the probation department, which, by the way, is going to be for probation. There's no way he's going to jail. I don't care whether it's 34 counts or 1 count. And then after that is entered, and I think it'll be a non-incarceration sentence, he takes an appeal. But that appeal is going to go well past the election and will be kind of irrelevant for...
You got to be careful, though, Paul. Alvin Bragg can get in trouble if he doesn't get time. He may not be delivering on his promise to get Trump. Go ahead, Mark.
Can I tell you something, Paul? And Paul's in New York, but I will tell you, in every other state jurisdiction that I've ever appeared in, every single one, without any exception, I cannot remember a time where somebody was convicted of a felony in state court, just even one felony, where they had been contemptuous during that trial and they were not remanded, meaning put into custody as soon as the jury verdict came back. And the cynic in me believes that that's why Trump readily agreed to the debate at CNN on the 17th of June to foreclose the judge from even engaging in that possibility.
Wow.
Well, Mark, the only reason I would disagree with you on that is he's been held in contempt 10 times by this judge. And you know that if you were in court and were held in contempt 10 times, you'd be sitting at Rikers Island eating bologna sandwiches tonight, not being on television with Chris. So this is a judge who's been self-restrained with respect to incarceration. And I don't think he's going to change his tune on that, because it would be such a short sentence, it would just create sympathy for Trump rather than...
I think this is the most provocative thing. Look, I didn't like anything about this process, to be honest. I didn't think this was a case that was worth bringing. I think it's caused nothing but trouble to the Republic. I don't think it makes the point that no one is above the law. I think it just calls the law into question. Richard Gabriel, I got to jump, but I appreciate you, and I will spare you the speculation so you remain untarnished. Gentlemen, Mark Garagos and Paul Callan, thank you for helping the audience understand these issues better. Really interesting points about what happens next, and that's what we're waiting for. Thank you, each and all. 4 minutes, 5 seconds, coming up. Hey, if you want to worry about someone getting away with a crime, forget about the Trump case. The case to watch is Christopher Gregor, accused of murdering his 6-year-old son. Back in court today. We know he abused his kid. We all saw the video, forcing him on the treadmill, all bruised up. The guy actually bites his son's head when he falls off at one point. But today, the defense had a legend as their expert witness. Famed pathologist Michael Baden, B as in Bravo, A, D as in Delta, E, N as in November. Look up his name in the break, and you'll see why. He may have determined the case today, and he determined it in favor of the defendant. I have why next.
Gregor. And at this time, can you tell me what that is?
I will not testify, Your Honor.
Mr. Gallucci.
And I'll tell you why. First of all, know this. They wait a defense to know whether or not they're going to have the defendant testify. And they do that for a number of reasons, mostly strategic. That was 31-year-old Christopher Gregor, accused of first-degree murder and child endangerment in the death of his 6-year-old son, Corey. He was just announcing he's not going to take the stand. Now, why did he decide not to take the stand? I could give you a bunch of reasons based on the case and what he would have to anticipate from the prosecution. But there was really one major reason that happened today that I think swung that decision. Now, you know this case, right? The release of the court TV video showing Gregor, you saw this. You saw what he did to his kid, right? Making him run on the treadmill. The kid's falling down. I mean, it's just horrible. It's everything you're not supposed to do. He literally bit his son's head, okay? 12 days later, the kid's dead. Seems open and shut, right? Gregor had shared custody with the ex. The mother had called Child Protective Services over 100 times in 18 months. No action. Think about that. Why? Gets confused. They're overwhelmed. They're understaffed. She's a recovering addict. But my understanding is that the father had peed dirty more than once also. In any event, the kid dies a little more than an hour after his father brought him to the ER, just hours after Corey's mother had returned him to the father. The day before Corey died, his mother had taken him to several medical facilities because she suspected abuse. Corey was given a clean bill of health the day before he died. Today came the big moment. The defense called into question Corey's cause of death, and they did it with one of the biggest names in the business. You're looking at him now. He certainly has my respect. Renowned pathologist Dr. Michael Baden. He contradicted the state expert that Corey was murdered and his death was caused by blunt force injuries to the chest, deep lacerations to the heart and liver. He said, or it was this.
Corey's cause of death has been confused because of extensive injuries caused by the CPR process. The injuries are all CPR injuries. Nobody can live for more than 2 minutes with a 1.5 inch laceration of the heart. The most likely cause of death was a very severe, rapid pneumonia.
Is it that simple? It certainly was for the defense and probably motivated them to not put the defendant on the stand, though there were plenty of other reasons why this defendant would have been asking for it if he gave a prosecutor a shot at him in open court. The jury is going to be hearing closing arguments tomorrow. How persuasive was Baden? That's the balancing point in this case. Let's bring in forensic pathologist Priya Banerjee, okay? She's been helping me through this from the beginning, okay? Former prosecutor Matt Murphy understands these cases, has been intimately involved with them. And criminal trial attorney and NewsNation legal analyst who knows all sides of this, Sarah Azari.
First, telling it's Priya.
Priya, first to the science. Priya, what is your take on Baden, the massive name and reputation on the stand, and saying, this is from the CPR, Priya, that's why he died?
So this is a very usual sort of battle of the experts and the two most common, issues at hand. Now, the one thing is, I haven't seen the whole autopsy, but the sort of excerpts I've seen from it, how do you decide that? Now, the body tries to heal itself with any injury, whether it's a paper cut or a laceration to the liver, the heart, a lung contusion. So anytime there's an injury that's not supposed to be there, the body has a very timed response to it. And the fact that there's acute inflammation, that is the body's sort of first-line defense, these inflammatory cells. You heard them called polymorphonuclear cells. But I'm just going to call it the sort of first-line defense of the body. And that doesn't happen after CPR. You're basically, the child's dead by then. Even if the blood is circulating, the body doesn't have a coordinated response. So this, to me, these are real injuries. But
Priya, just give me one more beat on this, then I want to go to Sarah for why it matters to the defense and what equates with reasonable doubt, which is all they're looking for. How could Bodden be so wrong?
Well, I'm looking at it like he's looking at just one aspect of it. So in my, I guess, overall assessment, without all the nitty-gritty, if you have an impact to the chest and then a lung bruise, a lung contusion, that makes it really hard to breathe. It's very painful. If anybody has bruised a rib, broken a rib, anything of that nature, it's very painful. And this kid was not medicated. And so if you don't take a deep breath, like they tell us after surgery, don't lay in bed, right? You're going to get a pneumonia. That's the same thing that's happening. So this kid, I think, is having sort of multiple episodes of being weakened. And when the lungs really take a hit, no pun intended, that the bacteria can sit in there, get a pneumonia, and then it spreads to the body that's already weakened.
So, Sarah, we're talking about probabilities here. And with a guy like Bodden sitting on the stand, how much percentage of doubt does he have to create that can make a difference in the jury room?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, Priya's explanation obviously makes sense to me, but the jury didn't hear that. The jury heard Dr. Bodden. And he has, as you said, tremendous gravitas. And he's testified for both sides. His testimony has led to acquittals in high-profile cases. And I can tell you, my own experience, he doesn't take every case. And what, ultimately you have a battle of experts, but the jury's going to go with who makes more sense. And so I think he just blew up. I mean, the cause of death is the real issue here. The big ticket, charge is the murder charge, not the child abuse charge, not to minimize it. But, it's all about whether he died of a natural cause or he died of blunt force trauma. And so he really, that cross-examination was very weak. Maybe Matt will disagree, but, that was no blockbuster moment. I think sometimes we mistake theatrics for effectiveness, and it wasn't. Asking Dr. Bodden whether he's seen pictures of bruising going back in time, it's like, no, I've seen his medical history. I've seen his labs. This was rapid pneumonia. So I think it really made sense to the jury, and I think it really cast doubt on the prosecution's case.
Now, the pivot point, Matt, is you take a guy like Bodden and you play to his arrogance. This is an older guy now. He's past prime. He wants to be right about it, but he doesn't know the full picture because he's more interested in his own opinion than he is the facts. Was the prosecution able to do that to him?
Well, first of all, Chris, the good doctor really hit the nail on the head here. This is a microcosm of every child abuse case in America. Essentially, this is the way it always goes. You've got a child who's abused. The defense will almost every time call an expert to say that this was a part of resuscitation efforts. And that's really what explains the injury. So this case got a lot of media because, of course, of the video, but this is happening all across America right now. I agree with Sarah. I didn't think that the cross-examination of Baden was particularly good. I have to share with you, I've been wanting to cross-examine Michael Baden my entire career. I wasn't that impressed with his testimony because I've seen this shtick so many times from so many forensic pathologists. They always come in and do this. And if you got a good jury, that video is powerful. But remember, we had the testimony of the pediatric nurse. The nurse said they did pediatric CPR efforts. That's a completely different program than two hands on an adult. And she was adamant about that. And the testimony of Dr. Feingold, I thought was very, very persuasive. That was the prosecution expert who reviewed all the labs and talked about how he had no infection just hours before. So this is a common sense analysis. The law is going to encourage the jury to use their common sense. So you've got a 6-year-old who's perfectly healthy in every way, who's being horribly abused by somebody in his life. We know who it is because we've got this video. We've got all of those injuries consistent with abuse. And don't you just hate it when a healthy kid spontaneously just dies and it has nothing to do with the abuse? I think that's really where this jury is probably going. But, you never know. And I think Sarah's exactly right on that. You just don't know the impact that somebody like Baden can have.
I think we have a decent guess. There's only one person on this panel that even comes close to qualifying as the average person of intelligence, and that's me. So let me tell you what the sticking point would be for me, Priya, and you tell me. It's going to be when Baden said, hey, listen, if you really had a deep laceration like that in your liver or your heart, you would be done immediately. So the idea that this was a pre-existing thing from something else, no way. It had to happen then. Is that true?
I think you really have to look at how deep the laceration was. And I mean, it's not just the length, but the depth. Yeah, you're going to get bleeding, but if you're not going to get the reaction from into the injuries, like I said, unless the child is alive. And I think things have been brewing for a long time. The body is amazing. It can sometimes sequester injuries away. And I think these are significant. Yes, these are all life-threatening in and of themselves, but kids are very resilient. And I think it's, which is the straw that broke the camel's back.
This guy is going to...
That's a harder thing to assess.
This guy better pray.
But I think...
This guy better pray that he doesn't get convicted. Because when they see these pictures of this kid,
all together.
Wherever he goes,
it's horrible.
Doesn't matter what the sentence is, he's going to get a unique form of justice meted out to him. All right, let's leave it there for now. I got to jump because of time. Sarah Azari, thank you very much. I'm going to have you back when we get the next step of this. Matt Murphy, appreciate the context. And Priya Banerjee, thank you very much for helping us explain this. It was a big turn in the case today. Will it matter?
Yes.
We'll see, and we'll see together. Up next, oh boy. Don't you feel like we're all so done with COVID? Here's the problem. COVID is not done with us. In fact, we're just now learning that the worst may be yet to come. My doctor, Dr. Robin Rose, is seeing in real time what may be coming. And she can't explain why our government is ignoring it, but she can tell you what you need to know. And wait until you hear the worst part. Listen to this. There is a medicine that could help people who are suffering right now, and no one's telling you about it. That's going to change. Don't want to give the loud few any attention, and are frankly in no hurry to have to answer for what has happened or what is happening. But here, we get after it, and I have a gift for you. Dr. Robin Rose, double board certified physician, long COVID specialist at Terrain Health. She is treating me for long COVID and giving me an education along the way. And she is with me on the Substack, giving all of her understanding of my situation to help your situation. So, COVID is not going away. Why do I care? It's a cold, right?
So the reason why you care is because of long COVID, or what I call post-COVID conditions that can persist. And we know that because the virus, now it's come out, we've known, my working group has known for a very long time, but now in mainstream news, like MedPage today just came out last week talking about the fact that they have studies that are showing that they see remnants of the virus. So viral RNA, whole spike protein, fragments of spike protein, and the nucleocapsid.
Can I make you uncomfortable for 1 second?
Sure.
Is it true, yes, this is a leading question, is it true that it seems to you as if there are two realities? The reality within the clinical community of people who see patients and understand certain things, and what is acknowledged and reported in the places that are supposed to be on top of this?
Yes, there is. I mean, we're drowning in the clinics. My colleagues across the country and across Europe, we're drowning with thousands of patients, hundreds of patients, screaming for help. And it's hard because these people are really, really sick, and we don't have a lot of answers, and we're just digging through the research ourselves, we have tens of thousands of research papers, publications from major academic institutions all over the country that have helped us have a really good understanding of the pathophysiology of this disease and what's happening. And therefore, we've come up with novel approaches to treatment to help these people.
Now, the scary but also good news is it's existing in the gut. And you say, well, that's very troublesome because of how much effect your gut is going to have on the rest of your body and all the major systems. There's also an opportunity in this. Tell us.
Yeah, so I think what's been missed is there's been very good publications out, especially from a group in Italy, Dr. Carlo Brogna, brilliant, and his colleagues have been publishing since the beginning of the pandemic, specifically 3 or 4 publications over the last 2 years that have identified the virus as a bacteriophage, meaning the virus can get inside the bacteria in the gut microbiome and it can multiply and also take over the DNA or the bacteria and basically self-replicate. And what happens is the gut microbiome becomes basically ground zero. All of these different inflammatory cytokines, enzymes, proteins, things that are super dangerous and cause inflammation, both in the nervous system, our gut, cardiovascularly, and also causing hypercoagulable states. So it's the gut is really it's basically rooted in the gut, like the actual disease process, and it's causing all of these different things to happen. And so finally, when you see that you have virus in the gut and it's basically persisting, you can tie all these things together that we see in long COVID patients, like the hypercoagulable state, cardiovascular issues, neurological problems, issues with dysautonomia, because of what is happening in the gut. You're taking out the bacteria, the good bacteria that make all these beautiful metabolites that you need to make neurotransmitters and that affect our brain and how, and temperature regulation and blood pressure and things that our body does automatically and mast cells and all these different things. This is terrible.
So where do you see an opportunity in this?
So Carlo Brogna has published and, just back in February, published a wonderful paper showing that just using Augmentin, 875
the antibiotic, on a virus.
Yes, because the virus is replicating inside the bacteria in the gut. So if you treat it with an antibiotic, then you're going to destroy those bacteria where the virus is replicating. And again, that's a big part of the issue. And so, as a gut microbiome specialist, I don't love giving antibiotics, but you sort of have to kill off these phages in order, and then you can rebuild. Yeah, his study basically showed that patients that got, he didn't, because of certain rules around research and so on and so forth, and you don't want to withhold treatment because it's not right. He did treat both arms, but one arm got it within 3 days or before and the other after. And he showed the treatment arm that got the antibiotics right away within 3 days, they basically had a statistically significant decrease in symptoms or getting rid of, feeling better, and also going on to long COVID as well. So this is really fascinating, interesting information that we could be utilizing in our clinics to treat. And I've used the Augmentin, or if you're penicillin allergic, you can use Zithromax with Xifaxan. And we've used this in the clinic, and we've been having really good results because those patients with long COVID that also have the viral persistent aspect, they need this. They need to clear the virus out of their gut.
The problem is, you shouldn't be hearing this from the first time from Dr. Robin Rose. This is what our government should be doing. This is what we should be hearing our lawmakers debate, and they're not. But I'm fortunate to have Dr. Rose in my life, and as new information comes up, I bring it to you. You can get it all on the Substack. The money that you pay is only $5 a month, by the way. But Dr. Rose is going to use the money to treat people who don't have the money to get the protocol. So it's win-win-wins all across the board. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for everything you're doing. We'll be right back. Maybe a phone call. We'll see how I feel. Get it? It's a joke. It's like a long COVID. All right, you want a bite of the apple? Now's your chance. Dusty, who do you have?
We have Danita from Baltimore, Maryland.
Danita, what's your question?
I wonder if Trump having to just go to court every day, being humiliated and having to show self-control, isn't maybe just punishment enough, or maybe even, the fact that he can't control anything. He has to be there when the judge tells him to be there. He can't react when he's hearing all these horrible things about himself. It must be torture for him. What do you?
I don't know. It's certainly not justice. That would be shame. That would be vengeance. That's not what our system's supposed to be about. And that's what has bothered me about this case from jump. And that's why I'm very concerned if there is a conviction, we're going to have to see what the sentence is. Now, people confuse this with me supporting the former president. That couldn't be farther from the truth. It's not my job as a journalist, but also it's not my disposition as somebody who's been victimized by him and his big mouth. So that doesn't mean that I think our justice system should be twisted to have political effect. And that's my concern about this case. It's also overshadowing real cases that needed attention. The one in Georgia, the one in D.C. Next.
Next, we're going to go to Chuck from California.
Chuck, what's your question?
I just wanted to know if you thought Trump did a better job or Biden did a better job for our country.
Listen, I understand why people have misgivings about Biden. I think that ticket is very problematic. I think him seeking a second term is problematic. I think Democrats who say, well, you can't have Trump in there, he's too dangerous, they should have thought of that in terms of what ticket they put together. They're forcing people to make a horrible choice. Now, that said, I don't know how much lower a bar you can get for a leader than Trump. I don't know how the man has not disqualified himself 10 ways from Sunday with his behavior. You're talking about the policies. I understand why certain of the policies are much more appealing than what's happening during the Biden administration. But you would have gotten those with anybody, not just Trump. So that's my analysis on it. And who should you vote for? Whoever you want. Should you be open to voting for Trump? Of course. Of course. Am I? No, but that's my choice. You make the choice that's best for you. I wish you had better choices than Trump and Biden. Dusty, what'd you think of that answer?
I thought that was a really good answer.
Felt good, right? Had good flow? Good flow?
Good. Yeah, you're getting good at this finally.
Yeah,
oh, my God.
They should pay me.
It sure took long enough.
You know what I mean? Enough with the free.
I know. They don't know you do this all for free. Goodness of your heart. But I was actually surprised that Trump, because we put up a banner earlier in the show that we were waiting for Trump to speak.
That was wrong.
I know. You love to tell me I'm wrong. For the record, I was not wrong. He was supposed to speak, and he chose not to, just to go back to Trump Tower and go right inside. I was actually surprised.
Good move for the former president. He's got enough energy behind him.
Oh, is this show? Oh, sorry. We got to go. We got to wrap.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
No.